Hey folks, this is Alexander Winn,
I'm Lacey Hannan.
and we are here for The Synthesis, where we examine real science and real history in entertainment. This week we are talking about Chapter 26, the final chapter of The Martian. Zero rehearsal on that. Zero rehearsal.
This is how you know we're married, because we can finish each other's
Pie.
sandwiches. It was supposed to be a Brooklyn Nine-Nine reference, and you totally missed it.
I made it a Community reference.
Oh.
All right. So this week we are talking about the end of The Martian, which is very exciting. We've been doing this for a number of weeks now.
We have.
And yeah.
We're wrapping it up. Okay, so next week we're going to talk about the movie. So
Yes.
get on renting it, watching it, buying it, whatever you have to do.
Yeah, so we're not quite done with The Martian. We're going to finish the book. Next week we do the movie. And
We'll compare-
wahoo. Yeah.
Compare different media's takes on it.
Yes, indeed. So,
Mediums.
jumping into the book, we pick up where we left off with the last chapter, which is Mark sitting in the MAV, waiting to take off. And he's pretty much done with Mars, which is a big deal for a book called The Martian. And yeah,
And
it's
we-
kind of all out of his hands. There's nothing left for Mark to do.
Which I would think would totally suck after like a year and a half of everything being on your shoulders. And yes, NASA is like both the angel and the demon sitting on your shoulder chatting with you for some of the time. Like everything's on your shoulders, and you have all of the control. And even when things go awry, like it's up to you to fix it, right? And now he's just helpless.
Yeah.
And I think that even more than the way NASA is feeling helpless in this moment, which we'll get to in a minute, I think it's got to be significantly worse. So.
Yeah, I'm kind of, one of the nice things about this book is that Weir sort of keeps it light. He keeps Mark Watney upbeat and keeps his morale high. They could, Andy Weir could have taken this book in a much darker direction where Watney starts dealing with like symptoms of depression, maybe even symptoms of like psychosis because he's been alone for so long. And, obviously some serious trauma responses and all that kind of stuff. And this is definitely one of those moments where if this was that kind of story, there would be a little bit of a freak out because he can't control anything anymore. There's nothing to do, and he's so wound up in the need to sort of fix problems that he can't. Very much like
Except for
in
Mark
The
Watney
Expanse.
doesn't get wound up.
Well, that's what I mean. It's like we don't have a character that's going there. This isn't
Right.
the story that's going to go
Okay.
there. But, for example, in The Expanse, they deal with the fact that Martians, people who live on Mars, are sort of categorically agoraphobes. When they visit Earth, they can't handle the giant open spaces because they've never experienced them. They've lived in tunnels their whole lives. And there was an opportunity to do that here with Mark Watney, and I'm glad they didn't.
Opportunity.
Yeah, opportunity.
He has perseverance.
Yes, he does.
Um,
So yeah, we actually, the first two things that happen in this chapter I thought was sort of interesting. We get kind of a 1-2 punch of things that they didn't really comment on, which I was surprised that Weir didn't address.
I didn't write any notes for the very beginning of this, so
Yeah.
tell me what you're talking about.
So we pick up with effectively a montage. Like this is very clearly taken from movies.
Oh, yes.
It's called They Gathered. And it's all about
Oh, that part, yeah.
people in like Times Square and in bars and living rooms, and they're all watching this, and it really sets the stage for this sort of global, viewership of what is about to happen. And one of the things that we get is this couple in Chicago,
Yes.
which is clearly Mark's family.
Okay. I thought you were
And-
just talking about Mark. Okay.
So,
I've got notes.
So I thought that was interesting that we are finally getting Mark's family, and it kind of made me look back and go, yeah, why haven't we heard from Mark's family in any of this?
Because what are they going to say? What are they going to do? What newness can they add to this story? I
mean,
think we can all put ourselves in those shoes.
I agree with that, but what I'm saying is that like nobody talked about it. Like we didn't, for example, they established that Mark's family is sitting with a representative from NASA who is specifically there to answer their questions. This is something that, as I understand it, happens in situations like this of sort of national security importance. They will often give the parents a representative from like the Army or whatever to tell them how this is going. And we don't know who that is. Like for another writer, that would have been, Bruce or somebody that we know. And it's just interesting that, this whole story is about rescuing this one guy, and we finally get to see his family, and that's not, like, he doesn't do a thing with it.
I feel like that's how it would go, though.
Yeah.
Like, I think that is realism of this world, because it's not like...
I totally agree.
If you have a kid in the military, they're not going to send his CO to go sit with you.
Yeah.
They're going to send someone who knows how to do this.
Yeah.
And so you don't want Bruce there. You don't want Venkat.
Right.
You want the type of rep who knows how to handle your breakdowns or handle your questions.
Yeah,
and
somebody trained.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And who can talk in layman's terms and all of that stuff.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I just thought it was interesting that, as much as anything, it's interesting that I didn't notice that we haven't met his family yet. Like, we haven't heard from them. He even talked about sending Martinez to go talk to them, but the parents were absent. It's sort of, for me, it's sort of like Sauron in Lord of the Rings. It's just sort of notable that this very important character never appears.
I totally disagree with you, because for me, I filled in those gaps.
Yeah.
Quite a few of these episodes, I have talked about, like, what would his parents be feeling, or like, you can empathize with this or that or with the other thing. And for me, I've already filled that in. So
Right.
I don't need the story to tell me, because it's easy to fill in. Where I can't fill in for Venkat, I can't fill in for Mindy or Annie or any of these other people. So to me, that would have just been padding between the storylines that I really care about, because as much as I would empathize with his parents, and it's not that I don't care about their storyline, it's just that their storyline cannot possibly be as interesting as Annie or Lewis or Martinez.
Right.
It can't be.
Okay. What else have you got about the parents and they gathered? And then we'll get to the other thing that surprised me.
I will say
Yeah.
that with the parents, I might have gotten very congested while reading that part. And
Coincidental allergic reaction while reading that?
Yes.
Yeah.
But the moment that we're talking about the crowds that have gathered in different areas of the world, right? And there was I think they say, like, a minor cheer for hearing Mark's voice.
Yeah.
And I love... It's a really great reminder for how much the public hasn't heard from Mark. They have seen transcripts. They have heard from Annie and Bruce. Like, they've heard from other people. This is what Mark had to say or whatever, and they might play clips, but they're not actually. The public isn't hearing that much.
Yeah.
From him specifically. So getting to hear his voice has to feel like, how much closer, like, we're on that last step.
Yeah.
And I think that there's like this precipice moment that you don't really get in the book, because you're seeing it from the people who, it's either you're hearing Mark or you're hearing from the people who are hearing from Mark.
Right.
You're not getting the outside point of view. So I had kind of forgotten how much these people don't know Mark like we, the audience, do.
Well, that's actually the perfect segue to the other thing that surprised me, which is after they gathered, we get Mark sitting in the MAV talking to Lewis on the Hermes, and they're talking through, the launch and getting ready and all that kind of stuff. And I realized when Mark got to the MAV, he could do voice communication for the first time. There was what would have been a very powerful moment for Mark Watney that we just completely skipped, which is hearing another person for the first time in like 2 years.
Oh,
right. Because he's been typing this whole time. He's been communicating through the rover and signaling it through Pathfinder. He's been writing emails and texts effectively.
Right.
And when he got to the MAV, he would have talked for the first time.
Can you imagine?
How did we not get that moment? Like, that is such a powerful moment that I'm really surprised they didn't milk that
now
more.
That you say that,
yeah,
there's a book called The Room that they turned into a movie with Dakota Johnson, and it's about a woman who gets kidnapped and she's put in this tiny shed, and the kidnapper also rapes her and she gets pregnant, and this child is like 5 years old before he ever leaves, and when he leaves he can't see properly, and so because if you're
Because his eyes never developed the need for long distance vision.
Exactly, because he never had access to that, right? I wonder if there's anything along the lines of like auditory changes that would happen if you're not hearing anything outside of a hab, because you're not hearing anything outside of it. You hear stuff from your suit, or if you were to lose, if something were to happen to your suit, you're not hearing anything outside because it's like
the air is so thin that it doesn't carry sound. He did still have his disco music and his 70s TV.
But it's all still so like But yeah, I guess
I don't think he would have experienced any kind of deterioration. I mean, if he hadn't had that, I would be curious to talk to a physiologist about what that would do. But those don't talk back. Like, that's not communication. You're just passively listening. And so, the opportunity to actually talk to Lewis and have a conversation back and forth is really
huge.
Yeah, that's huge.
Okay.
So those two things really jumped out at me as like, oh wow, these are big developments.
So then we head back to the Mav. And, Mark Watney's almost last words are, he's talking to Commander Lewis, and he's talking about Martinez when he says, "Tell that asshole no barrel rolls," because Martinez is the one who's piloting the Mav. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, so Mark Watney has literally removed the control panels. He's sitting in an empty room, just in a chair.
Exactly. So, and that cracked me up because at the time when I'm reading it, I thought those were his last words, and I was like, those are hysterical last words.
Yeah.
Like,
if this doesn't go well, if he blows up in midair, that will be the last thing that Mark Watney ever said. Was, "Tell that asshole no barrel rolls."
And that's just pretty funny. Yeah. So one of my questions for this episode is, what would you want your last words on Mars to be? The last thing you say there, because that they're going to put it in the history books. And so feel free to be as Mark Watney about it as possible, by which I mean be profane, be whatever. I don't care. Yeah. But I want to know what your last words would be. I've been thinking about it all week and I can't figure it out. Because I'm such a sentimental person that there's a part of me that would probably say something super lame and like sentimental.
Poignant and sappy.
And but simultaneously.
Yeah, there's something to be said for just being like, "Fuck you, Mars."
Which he later says.
There's, another thing that makes me think of is, and this is less surprising, but we didn't really get any information on Ares 1 or 2 in this book, which makes sense. We're focused on Ares 3. But this is a world in which someone has already said the first words on Mars. We've already gotten our one small step for Mars.
Yeah.
And there's a TV show that I very much enjoy that I think I might be the only one, that is called Defying Gravity. It's very soapy, but it's about a mission through the solar system. And there is something that always sort of makes me chuckle, which is in this show, they have already landed on Mars, and so somebody's already had that one small step moment. And every character on the show agrees that guy blew it. He had really dumb first words on Mars. His first words on Mars were, "The red planet conquered."
Oh, stupid.
Exactly. And everybody's just like, that is the worst.
How long did it take him to come up with that?
Exactly. And it just makes him sound like a musclehead. And, it sort of makes me wonder all of a sudden. I wonder what the first words of the Ares 1 crew were on Mars. This is, as Mark Watney is leaving, he gets a quote. But somebody else had a quote before this.
Yes. So, and speaking of firsts, this is the first crew that has ever been back to Mars.
Yes.
And they have that little moment in
Vogel
the book.
Vogel and Beck are talking about that.
And not even Mark can say that.
Yeah.
Mark will have been there once and will have never gone back.
They are the first to revisit Mars.
So that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
So in that conversation, Vogel and Beck are talking about the procedure for getting Mark Watney. And this is sort of an echo of the resupply mission when they were back at Earth, where they had to launch the rocket, and then Beck's job was to go out and actually grab the thing with his hands and guide it in. And so again, they're launching Mark into orbit, and he's, the Hermes is traveling and the Mav is going to come up, and their hope is that their paths will intersect and then Beck can actually go out and get him. But of course, Beck is connected to the Hermes by effectively a rope. And that rope is only so long.
Yeah.
And we have this interesting conversation where he tells Vogel, if I can't reach him, I want you to detach me. Because he has one of those things that you see like Apollo astronauts in that look sort of like chairs that have
We saw one
rockets
in
on it.
George Clooney had one.
Yeah, in Gravity.
In Gravity,
exactly.
yeah.
And so he could theoretically detach and go get Mark and then come back, which is what he wants to do. And Vogel seems to say no, mostly.
So, okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to put a little pause on here. We're gonna put a little pin in this conversation because we're coming back to it.
Yeah.
But I have to say, Slowfo Trash Panda, their response to what would they want to say for their last words is, "How the fuck do I have a rock in my boot already?" And if anything had been in my mouth, I would have choked.
I think Trash Panda wins.
Yes.
Trash Panda wins this game.
So I'm here for that. That's really funny.
Yeah. Also, Charlie Toud weighed in with, finally, no more red dust. And I immediately got a flashback to the Mars trilogy by Kim Stanley Robinson, because there's a scene where when they first arrive on Mars, all of the astronauts are complaining about the red dust, and she's like a microgeologist, basically. She's geologist, and she gets really upset because it's not dust, they're fines.
Okay,
there's a difference between dust and fines. So Charlie, it's not dust, they're fines. Fines.
Whereas my brain immediately went to the problem that all women pretty much have when they go to the beach and you're there for too long and suddenly there's sand in your underwear or like the bottoms of your swimsuit. And so now like you feel like a baby whose diaper is just slowly like falling off of them because it's really embarrassing and awful. And our producer has her hands over her face.
Mortified at this conversation.
Yes, did it. So anyway, that's where my brain went, Charlie.
Yep.
So thank you for that lovely image.
So do you have anything else before lunch?
Well, I wanted to go back to the Vogel
yes.
and Dr. Beck because so there's something kind of peculiar here. Vogel still calls Beck Dr. Beck.
Yeah.
After all this time together.
Well, I mean, he's a very formal guy. You can tell in the way that Vogel is written that he's a very formal kind of...
You can call people by their first name, but like they have been, it's like 5-6 people in a tiny container for
a couple of years.
2 years now, almost 2 years, and they're going to be gone for at least another 6 months. And you can't bring yourself to call them by first. Like, these people are your family, man. Yeah. And if you can't get on board with that, what are you doing here? Why did the psychologist let you come? Like, it really kind of freaked me out, and I was not wild about it. Like, I get it. There are people out there that, I had a teacher who, if anybody got it wrong and called her Mrs. Hale or Miss Hale, she'd be like, it's doctor. Yeah. She worked for that. Yep. That's what you call her. Okay. I totally get it. But her friends didn't call her Dr. Hale. Mm-hmm.
Right.
I don't know. I just feel like
kind of a, gotta stick up his butt. He's just not
a little bit, yeah.
He balances out Mark Watney, like Mark is the fun one and Vogel is not. Like,
I mean, touche.
Yeah.
But I want to know, the other question that I have for people is, would you agree to let go of the tether?
Yeah. Would you let Beck go out untethered to get Mark Watney?
Would you do it?
I honestly don't know.
That's
I feel
the thing.
like probably not, but I feel like I would probably do exactly what Vogel does, which is say no, and then when Beck calls him out and says, I bet in the moment you'll change your mind, Vogel just doesn't answer.
See, okay, so my response to this is that I know that I have a problem with authority, but I do follow a lot of rules, and so I probably would be like, I'm really uncomfortable. Why are you asking me this? I don't want you to say this to me. I wouldn't. No. The answer is no. Mm-hmm. And then in the moment, I would absolutely do it. Are you kidding me? Like, I know this about myself, that I follow the rules up to a
and be
point.
potentially responsible for killing two
Two
of the people.
Yes, because that's who I am as a person. I follow the rules up to like a certain point, and then I completely throw them out the window. And
That's who I am as a person. Is whenever I get the opportunity to kill two people instead of one, I just jump at it.
listen,
that's just.
how do you think I have all these freckles?
Yeah, seriously.
Okay.
All right.
So moving on.
So then the launch. Right?
Then the launch.
And yeah, wow. That rocket has some power. It pretty much immediately makes Watney start to space out and kind of lose focus.
But he does notice.
He does notice that something in the back of his mind told him that flapping was bad.
Yeah. He's got the canvas over the nose of the MAV.
Because they're launching him in a convertible.
Yes. And so,
Which is, by the way, something that I feel like Bruce is going to need to answer for because they specifically asked if taking the nose off the ship was going to be a problem, and he said no, because Martian atmosphere is so thin that as soon as you get high, as soon as you're going fast enough for air resistance to matter, you'll be high enough that there's basically no air.
Except for this created so much drag.
Exactly.
That
this is a problem, man.
Yeah. What did they prepare for? For Beck to go out and get Watney. It was like
he said he could do it as long as they're going 10 meters per second.
Right, but there was like a gap that they had to meet. Like they had to get within a certain distance, and I don't remember what it was.
I forget what it is.
But by the time Mark gets up there, he is 68 kilometers.
Yes.
Away from the Hermes, and
I
for
think
all
it's
of the
like 150 meters or something. Is like
for all of the Americans out there, that is 42 miles away, and they have 39 minutes and 12 seconds to get there. Not going to happen.
To alter their course to intercept.
Yes.
Yeah. Which is obviously not a thing.
They did not prepare for that.
I did think it was very cool to see Mark kind of going through, not enough blood getting to his brain and starting to get obsessed with his bolt with 5 sides. It was a very interesting representation of what it feels like to be almost passing out. There is I realized after the fact, there's an interesting sort of writer trick that is happening right here, which is, on the one hand, the power of this rocket making Mark Watney black out really underlines the power of what he's going through and sort of the danger and raising the stakes of like, oh, they almost killed him just by launching this rocket. But the other thing that it does that is genius is it takes him out of the picture. Mark, you're stuck in an empty room, you're strapped to a chair, you can't do anything, so we're just going to make you go unconscious while our other heroes do their thing, so that you don't have to explain why Mark is just like spending half an hour spitting out ideas on the radio, and like, he would not just be sitting there quietly while they worked, so let's just knock him out.
Yeah. Well, and because then he can't do anything. Like Martinez wants to know why this is happening.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have any answers. And it's because Watney is passed out.
Yeah.
And so,
as Martinez says, it's like flying a cow, which is hilarious.
Yeah. So they decide, well, by they, I mean Lewis, and I'm totally taken with this, is they decide that they're going to use their attitude thrusters to get to Mark. Mm-hmm. And they're going to blow the nose off of the Hermes.
Well, that is not quite yet. First they use the attitude thrusters, and so these, if you've seen movies like Gravity or like Apollo 13, these are the little bursts of air that come out to the different sides of the ship to turn it. They're just going to burn all of them in one direction to get them moving, and that fixes the intercept range, but you still have the problem of the intercept velocity. So the idea is, again, that Beck is going to go out and literally grab Mark with his hands. Like, this is they're not doing a docking procedure here.
Yeah.
These two spaceships are going to fly past each other, and Beck's just going to go out and get him. He says that he can do it as long as it's moving less than 10 meters per second. They hit all these thrusters to get close enough to him, but having done so, they're now going 42 meters per second. And for those of you from America, that is 94 miles an hour. So imagine that you are standing by the side of a highway and your job is to grab a hold of someone in a passing car, and that car is going 94 miles an hour. It's not going to happen. It's a joke.
Yeah.
And so they start talking about, how do we slow down?
Because the whole thing is that like Alex said, the attitude adjusters rotate the ship, but they're not what they say in the book is they're not made for rotating, is exactly what they say, which means that it's a misleadingly named part.
Yeah.
If they don't adjust the ship, but whatever. What I like here is they're talking about this. They tell NASA what they're going to do, and then Annie is like, wait, what did any of that mean? And so we get what Alex and I would refer to as a teledonna.
Yes.
For anybody who watched The West Wing and then
listened to the
West Wing Weekly, they coined this term, which is pretty funny, but it's based on, in the show, you've got this character who's a very smart woman but doesn't know she's essentially like a secretary to one of the main guys.
She's one of the assistants, and her name is Donatella. Donna. And
she asks the questions that the audience would ask.
Yeah.
And then someone explains it to her. And, she's not always the person who asks, but she's usually the person who asks.
Yeah, and she's smart. It's not that she's dumb, it's just that she's new.
Yeah.
And so she's the character who doesn't know how this thing in government works, so another character can explain it to her, and in the process, the audience learns how it works too.
And because her name is Donatella, the hosts on the podcast call it Teledonna.
Yeah.
So we're getting a Teledonna, but it's to Annie. Yeah. And
which by the way, I love. We cut from the Hermes and all this stuff happened, and we cut back, and the quote from Annie is, "Whoa, a lot of shit just happened really fast. Explain."
Yeah.
It's just like the most straightforward, what is going on?
Yeah. And essentially everything that is happening is they're dealing with the Hermes, which has ion engines, which are slow and steady. And so essentially they're trying to turn this tortoise into a hare.
Yeah.
And
you got to move fast with an engine that is designed to go slow.
Yeah.
Of course, Mark comes up with his own plan because he wakes up. He wants to be Iron Man. He wants to punch a hole in his suit and use the escaping air as a thruster, which is insane.
Which is totally insane.
Crazy. And of course, Lewis tells him no. But it does give her an idea.
Well, in pretty much the same breath that he says he wants to be Iron Man, he also tells Mars, fuck you.
Yes.
And I love that. Yeah. Again, I'm a very sentimental person, so it would be, it's like...
I'm a very sentimental person, so fuck you.
Well, it's why it's funny, but there's a part of me that's like, but dude, you lived. Like, you won.
Yeah, Mars did right by you, man.
That
could have been a lot worse.
Yeah, exactly. So, I don't know. I mean, it was really terrible and traumatizing and all of the awful things. But it's just it's funny that we get this fuck you to Mars simultaneously. I'm like, that's the last thing you're going to say to it, huh?
Well, and
all
also, you're not quite done, man.
Yeah. But
don't piss off this planet. It still has one more shot.
It's not Mars that would be doing it.
True.
It's space.
Yeah.
So, I enjoyed that. Yeah. And then the other thing I enjoy here is we're watching the crew do what he's been doing.
Yes.
And they're figuring out how to handle this new problem on the fly.
Yes. Creative problem solving from someone who isn't Mark Watney, which is fun.
So now Lewis is like, wait, let's not have you puncture a hole in your suit. Let's breach the hole in the Hermes.
Yeah, they're gonna breach the VAL, which is the vehicular airlock.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
And I absolutely, as a person who's afraid of space and who's not the world's biggest space nerd, I don't think I understand the full consequences of breaching this spot. So I felt like I did not get as worked up about it as maybe I was supposed to.
Yeah. So basically, the most important thing in space is air. Everything else you can sort of work around. But if you run out of air, you're going to die. And the nice thing about physics is that it's very predictable. And so the idea here is They have a whole ship that is full of air, and if they puncture a hole in it, all that air is going to rush out of the hole. But because of Newton, the air rushing in that direction is going to push the ship in the other direction. And so they're going really fast. So all they need to do is point their ship in the direction that they are moving and then pop a hole in it in a very specific spot, and it's going to push the ship backwards, which effectively decelerates it.
Yeah.
But that means that all their air is going to get sucked out. And that is just a really scary thing to do. And there's actually a moment, it's kind of dark moment, but it's interesting, in which Martinez asks, should we go get in our spacesuits? Like, just in case the door doesn't hold and the air in our, on the bridge gets sucked out too. And Lewis's response is, don't bother, because if the door doesn't hold, we're going to get sucked out of this spaceship at the speed of sound, and we're all dead. So just don't even bother.
And there's something about this moment where they are brainstorming together and they're figuring out this problem, and Lewis is being such a risk taker. And I think there's something fascinating about her as a leader, because I was frustrated with her at the beginning of the book, staying out there so long looking for Mark when she had this whole team that she had to be taking care of, and their lives were on the line and she wasn't coming back.
Yeah.
And that was really frustrating. But then here she's sitting there, and then there's all of this guilt that we're dealing with, which is reasonable and I wasn't frustrated by, but it's hard to watch.
Yeah. But
then she does this, where she's like, all right, Johansson, you're going to be the one who lives. You're going to eat us if necessary. Yeah. Okay, now we're going to blow this hole in the Hermes. And I'm just sitting here going, big moves, lady.
Yeah.
Holy shit. Like,
yeah, whoa.
I wouldn't, she's the worst kind of person to gamble with.
Yeah.
Because she's going to be the person who has probably been counting cards, and maybe she doesn't know how. She actually probably hasn't, because her morality, her ethics would point her in a very specific way, and she'd be like, no, I'm not going to do that, even though I know how. And she would just I think she's so smart that you wouldn't want to go up against her. Yeah. And
she'll go all in.
Yeah, and I think it's fascinating to watch her do it, because it's not, even though she did stay out there for Mark for so long, I thought it was for sentimental reasons. I didn't realize it's because she's such a risk taker. Yeah. And it's what makes her a good leader, is she balances those two things really well.
Well, and just the absolute focus in a crisis. Like, yeah. Man, listen, Rich Purnell may be a steely-eyed missile man, but Commander Lewis is the steely-eyed missile woman. Like, holy crap, that is...
I want to be her.
Yeah, like whoa.
I'm
and
here
by the
for
way,
it.
Jessica Chastain, friggin' perfect casting for next. When we get to this in next week, everybody in this movie is perfectly cast, but man, she is perfectly cast.
It's true.
So they're going to do this. They calculate it out, and interestingly, this is one of those areas where science is a little more forgiving than people often realize. It doesn't actually matter how big a hole they blow in the valve, because if it's a big hole, all the air is going to shoot out at once, and it's going to be a massive kick to the chest, and then they're done. If it's a small hole, it'll just leak out for a while, but it'll still have the same effect. It'll just be drawn out, Yeah. It's just a nice little bit of wiggle room. But the effect is it's going to drop them from 42 meters per second down to 13. And Beck immediately says, I can work with that. I can do that. But again, just to give everybody a sense of what that means, picture yourself on that highway. That car that you're going to try to grab somebody, you're going to grab onto that car effectively. Uh-huh. That car just went from going 94 miles an hour, which would kill you, to 29 miles an hour. He is jumping onto a car going 29 miles an hour. No. And that is, I would not want to be in charge of grabbing onto a ship flying by at 29 miles an hour.
I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I do like Watney's response to this plan. It is so perfectly written, which is he objects because he makes a joke out of it. He says he wants all the memorials to himself because he's afraid of everybody dying for him, and that seems stupid. And so I don't want you to share the memorials with me. I want them all for myself. And it's funny. And then
it's irreverent and also sweet.
And then her response is even better because she's like, I'm looking at the shoulder patch and it turns out I'm the commander. So like, fuck you, I'm going to do what I want, you know? And it's just like, to get a little bit of her humor, because she doesn't seem to have a very big sense of humor, which is fine.
Her humor only shows up in the form of slapping him down and like asserting her command.
Yes.
Yeah. Andy Weir has said in interviews that the character of Mark Watney was very easy to write because he's the same kind of snarky as Andy Weir himself. So I think this is a little bit of Andy Weir's snark coming out of Lewis's mouth for once. That is such a great exchange. Yeah. And in the meantime, Annie is watching from Earth and hears that they're going to blow a hole in the ship, and her immediate response, profane as hell, because it's Annie and we love her, is, fuck me raw, I'd better get to the press room. And she's like, is there anything else I need to know? And everybody's just like, oh my God. And she's like, sounds good.
Yeah, well, and that's one of those great moments where it's like, Annie is not going to get down about this. She's like, no. Oh, shit. Okay, and then deals with it. And it's like,
and she's the only one on Earth who can do something. Yeah. All the scientists are unable to act, but Annie can. This is her moment to act.
Yeah. And we get to see her be at the top of her game. Same with Lewis. Mm-hmm. So we're getting to see some badass women doing badass work.
Everybody gets their hero moment. It's so great.
Well, not everybody.
No?
We'll get there.
Okay.
So now we're on to how are they going to blow a hole in the hole?
So they're going to make a bomb. And the bomb that they're going to make is with sugar, because Vogel is a chemist and he knows how to make stuff blow up. In fact, as the book talks about, a lot of his training revolved in learning how to make things not blow up. Yes. Basically he takes sugar and he puts it into a pure oxygen environment. He takes an oxygen tank and fills up a particularly strong beaker. And it needs to be strong because if you just put it in a weak beaker, it'll just kind of fizzle. But if you put it in a really strong one, the idea is that the explosion will build and build and build and build and build until it finally cracks the container, and then that concussive force is what's going to blow the hole in the ship.
Right. I like that he's talking to himself in German.
Yeah.
And he says, sehr gefährlich, which means very dangerous. And he just like keeps saying it to himself.
He's just sitting there making a bomb going, this is a bad idea, this is a bad idea, this is a bad idea.
And I just like that he walks you through how sugar makes a bomb.
Yeah.
I'm not going to try and... You want to tell us?
Okay. So the idea behind combustion, just sort of in general, this is what happens to the sugar is the same thing that happens to gunpowder when you fire a gun. That is that a solid becomes a gas very quickly. That you burn a thing and that becomes a gas, and all of a sudden the gas wants to expand where the solid was perfectly happy to just sit where it is. And so you burn it, it becomes a gas, and then it immediately wants to expand really fast, and that creates force. And so in a gun, you use a spark to set off gunpowder. It gasifies, basically. It becomes a gas, and that pushes the bullet out of the barrel because the bullet has to get out of the way of this expanding gas, right? Same thing happens with cannons. Interestingly, the same thing happens with meteor impacts. When the meteor hits the ground, the rock vaporizes, which is why, fun little fact here, which is why meteor craters are always circular. You never have a meteor crater that is like at an angle as if the meteor came in and hit, like if you throw a rock into the sand, it'll be sort of an oval shape. Meteor craters never are, because it's not the rock hitting the ground that makes the hole. It's that the rock hits the ground and then the ground explodes. The rock acts like gunpowder.
You guys, okay, so you might sometimes look up and be like, wow, Alex is really the one who does all of the explanation of science on this here show, and it's because he's a really good teacher and I enjoy it. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I just wanted to put it out there so all of you know that I actually request this.
Yeah.
We'll be going on hikes in like these beautiful places. We're like in New Zealand, and I'm like, okay, so explain the difference between velocity and speed again.
Yeah.
And then he explains it to me for the third time in completely different vocabulary than the last two times, so that maybe I retain all of it. So he's a great teacher. And I ask for this. Okay.
Yeah.
So I ask for it
I'm
on
not-
your behalf too. Sorry if you don't like it.
I promise I'm not a blowhard. It's that she requested that I talk about sugar.
I really do.
But yeah, so, obviously one of the important ingredients in combustion is oxygen. And so he actually talks about how the spark that burns this sugar, if it had happened on Earth, it would have like sizzled a little bit. It wouldn't do much. But Vogel is putting this in an all-oxygen environment. And, interestingly, they're in 0G, which means this is not a pile of sugar like you can picture in a bowl. This is a cloud of sugar. It is filling the jar and floating in 0G, which means that there's an incredible amount of surface area. Every single grain of sugar is exposed to oxygen on all sides. And so when that fire starts, it spreads incredibly quickly through that space. And all the sugar burns up, which creates this concussive force as the gas tries to expand, but it's contained by the beaker, and it grows and grows and grows as more of the sugar burns and burns and burns in a fraction of a second, until finally there's enough pressure that it cracks the beaker, and now the pressure differential between the air that was outside the beaker and the gases inside the beaker are so great that it creates effectively a shock wave expanding out from the beaker, and that's what's going to tear a hole in the wall.
Huh.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
So that's Vogel's sugar bomb.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
And so they do it, and they slow down.
Yeah. Okay. I'm reeling at the moment. Also, I'm reeling because for the first time ever, Iman economist and I don't agree on something.
What?
What? I know. We all thought that we were just the same person. I'm over here like typing in as I'm pretending I live in Australia. Oh, I'd rather live in Australia. Anyway, because she says, hell no, an astronaut in the Hermes is worth 2 in the vacuum of space.
Mm-hmm.
I hear you.
Yeah.
I hear you. Girl, I hear you. Also, wouldn't stop me.
Yeah.
But she also says that it's
It'd
hard
be hard.
because she sees where he's coming from. So anyway, back to, okay, we've done the sugar bomb, and he keeps talking about how dangerous it is. And at one point, Beck says, this has been kind of a weird day. And I was like, dude, that's the biggest understatement of this entire book.
That, like, if this had really happened and this was all on sort of the news feeds, that would be the memeable moment.
Yeah.
That would be the moment that everybody turns into stuff on Reddit.
Exactly.
This has been kind of a weird day.
And then we find out that they have 28 seconds to intercept. They're cutting it so close. It's like as much as like
Yeah.
to cut it that close and have the juxtaposition be it's been kind of a weird day.
Yeah.
It's like it all happens on the same page, and it's just like you're reeling from it, which is just, I don't know. I liked that that happened. So
You know what I like? I like SoFlo Trash Panda's take on the synthesis, which is he explains the science and you explain the humanity and the snark, which, yeah.
Oh my God, it's our relationship.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's science and entertainment. It's science and
yeah.
humanity. It's the nerd and the snarky one. Yeah.
Slowfo gets it.
Yeah, exactly.
Slowfo. I love that name. I can't get over it. Slowfo. It's so great.
So yeah, they're able to slow down, and then Beck goes out to get Watney. He goes to jump on that 30-mile-an-hour car.
Okay, but
Yeah.
before we even get there, you guys, I don't know why I have this written down. Something must have happened we go back to Earth, where they're all just sitting there in like mission control, and everybody is helpless. There is literally nothing they can do. And even if they had an idea of like, oh, don't blow the thing, do this instead, they can't because of that time difference.
Yeah. The light delay to
The
Mars.
light delay.
So I mean, really, at this point, it's over. Like
But-
they're still hearing about it, but the events have already
But
happened.
this is where I wrote the
Yeah.
note, Alex.
Okay.
So this is what we're talking about, okay?
Yeah.
So listen, the whole world has to feel like this. And can you imagine the whole world feeling the same emotion? Like seriously, take a moment to think of the billions of people we have on this planet, right?
Yeah.
And not everybody has stopped for this.
No.
That's just not the way the world gets to work. There are too many people who still have a Starbucks shift or something else.
Or who just don't care about the guy stuck on Mars because they have no soul.
Or they have bigger problems to deal with.
Or that.
Okay? No, we're going with the humanity here. Listen, I just can't imagine having that many humans at the same time having pretty much the exact same reactions, because you've got the helplessness, you've got the anticipation, you've got fear that's mingled in there, you've got this stress, because like I imagine that a lot of people, the first thing, like when they find out whether or not Mark gets saved or not, they're going to cry because they have all of this pent up emotion, right? So one way or the
breaking.
other, there's going to be crying and cheering, or crying and dropping to the floor because you're sad, like whatever it is. But you've got all of this buildup, and it's going to look the exact same for almost everybody. And I literally can't think of a time in history where that would have happened, because we're in a time where communication
Yeah.
is so much
There,
more accessible.
there are a few candidates. When we landed on the moon was definitely a global event.
Yes.
But I think this would be even more so because, like you said, more people have like televisions at this, in the 2030s when this is set. And of course, there are just more people. I think there are a few candidates. Landing on the moon, the end of World War II, I think was probably celebrated pretty much in every corner of the world.
Yeah, but were people getting that information at the same time?
Yeah. I
That's
mean, by
probably
radio, like a
not.
lot of people would have, but there were still plenty of towns that were, in the middle of nowhere, Australia, that didn't have a radio. And,
Yeah, I guess that's just what it kind of keeps coming back to for me is, and we've just got so many more people in the world
Yeah.
that
No, this definitely would be an unprecedented event.
and I just like I don't know, I tend to like, what are aliens gonna think of us when they encounter us, right? And can you imagine encountering humans in this moment, being
Yeah.
like,
Whoa.
all like
They're a hive mind.
yeah, exactly. I don't know. So this is
Yeah.
where my brain goes. It's a little weird, but anyway, I was, I had a really big moment of like, I can't imagine that many people feeling that one emotion together.
Yeah.
So that was really cool. So now we have Beck going out,
Yeah.
and Vogel is fascinating because he is pulling on, or he's breaking on the tether.
Yeah.
And he has to do gut feel physics, quote unquote, which
Yeah,
is
so-
terrifying.
So Beck goes out to get Mark Watney, and then they come back. But the thing that you have to keep in mind here is they're still not, like, Mark Watney's ship is still moving relative to the Hermes. So there is a version of this where Beck could get to Mark Watney, touch Mark Watney, and then get yanked away like a fish on a line, because the Hermes is just going by and he didn't have time to actually grab Watney. And so Beck has to work fast, get himself attached to Mark Watney, but then even when they exit Mark's ship and he's got him on the line, there is still the risk that if they stay out there so long that the line snaps taut, it could rip the line out. They could break the line. And now Watney and Beck are stranded in space as the Hermes goes sailing off into the distance. And so Vogel has to reel them in. He has to start accelerating them back up to the Hermes' speed, but not so fast that he will break the tether, but also not so slowly that they will run out of tether before he gets them up to speed.
Because
And
if there's too much force on the tether, then it would break free from Beck's suit. But if there's too little pressure on or force on the tether, then they jerk to a stop and it rips from his suit. So the same thing happens essentially either way, which is
but
not good.
But he threads
obviously
the needle. He
threads
gets
the
it
needle
done. He pulls them
with
in
his gut feel physics.
with his gut feel physics.
Terrifying.
Yeah. And they pull him in. and they've got Mark, and wow, what a moment when she radios back to Earth and says 6 crew members safely aboard. That is such a great...
And then we jump straight into the NASA rep getting a hug at the Watney household.
Yeah.
And I was just like...
Yeah, the parents pulled him in for a hug.
I was just like, oh my God, how often do you think that the reps get like to be there for the good news?
Yeah.
And this big of good news, like this is a career like highlight,
Yeah,
you know?
This is a story to tell later for sure.
Yeah. I also couldn't believe that Teddy didn't make a red folder. He only made one folder, which means that he has one speech prepared for this moment, and it's only if something goes right, which I'm sitting here going, dude, there wasn't a great chance.
Way to tempt fate, man.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, there is a great moment. So this whole sequence, we'll get into it more next week when we're talking about the movie, but this whole sequence does have several significant changes. I haven't done the math, but my expectation is that this sequence probably changes the most from book to film. And no spoilers, but there are some big changes. But I did have to laugh because there's one moment that is a little prescient by Andy Weir, which is he talks about how when Mark gets pulled into the airlock, it's just him and Beck. And Beck immediately whisks him to the hospital, which is really just Beck's quarters. And he mentions that if this had been a movie, everybody would have met me in the airlock, and there would have been high fives all around and all that kind of stuff. And lo and behold, a few years later, they turn The Martian into the movie, and everybody meets him in the airlock, and there are high fives all around. And so
my God.
I just have to believe that the filmmakers on set that day were like, well, I mean, he told us what to do.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. And then, we pretty quickly move into wrapping it up mode.
Yeah, Mark talks about why the Earth, the Terran community, would put millions of dollars into saving him. And he says something. He says, they did it because every human being has a basic instinct to help each other out. It might not seem that way sometimes, but it's true. And I was like, can you be real and remind the world of that right now? Because like he said, it might not seem that way, but it's true. And I basically am the person who I believe that. Yeah. I believe that people like to help.
Lacey and I are both deep optimists.
Yes. And it can be frustrating and painful when the world doesn't live up to our standards. Yeah. But I really liked that he put that in there, especially it follows him saying, in space, no one can hear you scream like a little girl as he's being pulled along.
There's also a great moment where he's talking about mission day versus mission soul and the different time on Earth versus on Mars. And then he says, but it doesn't matter what time it is on Mars because I'm not there.
Yeah. And then, really one of the last things that we find out is he stinks.
Yes.
To high heaven, and no one
in a
long time. Which, can you imagine how itchy he has probably been? And he hasn't said a word about it. The other thing that hasn't been said is they don't talk about his weight in the book. In the movie, his weight loss is very, very apparent.
Very dramatic.
And I'm guessing it's because you can communicate smell pretty easily in a book. Yeah. But not in a movie. So it's another indicator of how much he's gone through. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we never touch on his weight loss, which is interesting.
That is interesting.
And then he's essentially like, whatever, it's the happiest day of my life. End of book.
The end.
Yeah. And I was just like, what the fuck?
We could have used a little more denouement.
Yeah. I found this very frustrating. Yeah. And I discovered that people who listened to the audiobook got something that people who read the book did not. And so I would now say anybody who wants to read this book should do the audiobook.
Yeah.
Because
there's an extra chapter at the end of the audiobook that has sort of like, not exactly short stories, but they are moments from the world of the Martian. So, for example, you get the moment that Mark Watney learned he was going to be on the Ares 3 crew. And you get Mark and Martinez talking in a bar, and like you get these moments from the larger world, which is cool.
Yeah, and for me, we have been through so much with this guy that I wanted to revel in his safety.
Mm-hmm.
We had so much of lack of safety.
Yeah.
That I needed to sit in that longer. I needed to see more reactions. I needed to know how more people were feeling. And guess what? I can guess what those feelings are, but I want to be told because I need it as an audience member.
Yeah.
And I didn't get that. And so for me, there was a letdown because it was like, Andy's saved. Bye.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, and by the way, he's not actually saved yet. Like, as they specifically say in this book, space travel is actually more dangerous than being stuck on Mars. And, you know, the tagline of the movie is "Bring him home." And he's not home yet.
He's not home.
Like, you've still got several months of space flight to get through in a ship that was already deteriorating a little bit before they got back to Mars.
And, like, we don't have to go through all the details of it, but also his body has been running on multivitamins and potatoes.
Yeah. What is happening nutritionally when he gets more food?
What is the protocol for this? Because we all know that, like, you come across a starving anything and you can't just give them the food you would normally eat. Like, that's not how it works.
Yeah, very dark but interesting stories from World War II of feeding Holocaust survivors, and it killed them because you have to ease them back into food. You can't go straight from starving to not.
Yeah. And so, like, I don't know, there's just all of these questions. I wanted him to see him see Earth.
Yeah.
If not step foot on Earth. I felt like there was something missing. I didn't get to have the ease. We got the joy of saved, but not the ease of safety.
Well, and especially, you know, there's also, from the scientific standpoint, you know, one of the things that I was thinking in this chapter is I want more stuff in space from this author. You know, like, I want more stuff, the space dynamics, the intercept velocity and intercept range and all that kind of stuff was fun. And I would be very interested to hear, what was Mark's reintroduction to Earth gravity like? Yeah. He's been in space and on Martian gravity for a couple of years. That would be an interesting retraining regimen. Like, he probably had a hard time breathing when he landed.
And the other thing is, like, they have a hole in the ship, and they used a lot of fuel to do this last maneuver. So
Martinez probably had a pretty cool time, like, bringing him into Earth orbit.
Exactly, because they talk about that in the chapter of, like, okay, if we do this, how much of our fuel do we use and how much do we need? And now they're going in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that? Like, to me, there's so much more of the story that just, I needed an epilogue.
Yeah. And
there wasn't an epilogue, and I'm mad about it.
Well, aside from the lack of epilogue, I think this is the point where we sum up The Martian. What do you think of the tale of Mark Watney?
I mean, you guys, I fucking loved it. I don't know if you can tell, but I loved it.
We're big fans.
I think my biggest problem literally was
not enough.
So I am here for it. I want more of this type of literature, but I want to see it outside of just, like, science fiction. Yes. I want to see it, you know, okay, I get it. I get that there's, like, alternative history where you get a lot of actual real history and things like that, but I want it in, like, my fantasy. I want it in my mystery novels. I just want
I think
the heavy realism.
Having it in your fantasy is an example of why Lord of the Rings is so popular, because that is a fantasy story with this kind of aesthetic where the languages and the history and the architecture and, like, everything has this incredible attention to realism and detail.
Yes, but the difference is
into it.
I think there's a difference there, though.
Okay.
Which is, if you don't know much about languages, Tolkien isn't explaining languages to you.
That is true.
And The Martian is explaining science and making science cool.
Yeah.
The thing about learning the Elven language that Tolkien makes up is that you, because you are a fan, have decided it's cool, and so you're going to go learn this.
It's extracurricular.
Yeah, whereas Tolkien didn't make it cool. He was just like, I think this is cool, so I'm going to put this in my story. Whereas Andy Weir made science cool.
Right.
Like, I think that's
fair.
the difference.
Yeah, the educational quality, the sort of showing you how it works, not just showing you that it works.
And not making the audience feel stupid.
Yeah.
Making it understandable, even if you feel like speed reading it, you're like, I probably could have understood that. I just didn't feel like it, right? I had moments like that. But anytime I slowed down, I was like, oh no, I get this. And so you're reminding the audience that they're smart. You're teaching them something new. How much they'll retain, who knows? I now know that LCDs have water. There's water there.
Can't
so
operate in a vacuum.
Yeah, I can't operate in a vacuum. Like, I'm not going to retain a bunch, but I retained a little bit. I know that I can learn this, which is not something I learned in school. Like, there's just something about elevating your audience.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of artists do that. They talk to the people that they think are already at their level, whatever that level might be.
Or they play to the lowest common denominator. That's something that people talk about a lot in entertainment, is playing to the lowest common denominator, which is ironically a mathematical term. Lowest common denominator being, the number that is a multiple of both of these things, the lowest number. And, you can make a good argument that The Martian is a shining example of playing to the highest common denominator, which is to say he's not aiming it at experts. He's aiming it at what everyone can understand. He's just aiming it at the top of what everyone can understand. This is the most
and you can't understand it.
Stuff that anybody could pick up. Yeah, and I just love that doctrine. And that is, just to bring it full circle, the aesthetic of the synthesis. That is what we are talking about on this show, is using science, using history, using realism and accuracy in entertainment, not educational content, in genuine entertainment, but aiming it at the highest common denominator.
And, not everybody has to be the Martian. Not everybody has to be like, I'm only going to do one thing that isn't real. You can.
There's room for fantasy in this.
Yeah, you can have a lot more breathing room than Andy Weir allowed the Martian to have. That's okay too, but the amount of realism that he injected into it makes it special.
Yeah.
What about you?
It enhances the fiction. No, I feel exactly the same way. I mean, I've said before that The Martian was a big inspiration on Terra Genesis. And, I mean, The Martian, along with other things, helped inspire Terra Genesis. The success of Terra Genesis helped us found Edgeworks Entertainment, and now this is the doctrine.
Our branding is essentially what we just explained.
Exactly. That is
and realism.
What this company does. Yes. Yeah. And so that's what I'm dedicating my life to do. This is not just something I enjoy. This is something that I'm trying to emulate in everything I do to one degree or another. And
Alex and I had this interesting conversation last night where I learned, I've always known this, but I had never really pinpointed it. Just how passionate he is about authenticity. I've always known that he loves this stuff, right? But you know how you have that one thing that you would love to just bring to the world. This is the passion thing. For him, it's authenticity. And I think I didn't understand how deep it went until we were talking about it last night. And so, here we are bringing Alex's passion to the world.
Well, thank you. It is. And specifically, the thing that I'm the most passionate about is something that Andy Weir just absolutely nails, and The Martian is often the example that I use when I tell people about this, is, on one end of the scale, there is educational content. There is textbooks. There are, the things that you see in a classroom. And a step up from that is edutainment. You can hear this term edutainment, where, it's meant to be kind of fun, but it's also meant to be educational. This would be something like the History Channel, where it's not just nonfiction. It's not a documentary. They'll dramatize certain scenes, but it's still meant to be educational. And I don't really like edutainment. What I like is authentic entertainment. I like things like The Martian. I like things where the entertainment is informed by the science. And it's not about teaching you, but you learn along the way anyway. I mean, how many people have learned things about World War II from watching movies like Schindler's List and Saving Private Ryan? But nobody would ever call Saving Private Ryan an educational film. Like,
No.
it's probably been shown in a lot of classrooms,
Yes.
but it's not an educational film. It is entertainment, and it is filled with authenticity.
I think Glory was the one that we watched. Is that the name of it?
Yeah, Glory from set in the Civil War.
Yeah, I think I had 3 different teachers show that to me between middle school and high school.
Exactly.
And
you know,
you do learn a lot.
the Assassin's Creed video games are another example. People love the historical authenticity, but nobody would ever describe Assassin's Creed as an educational game.
So
Yeah.
this leads me to, I want to make a request of everybody. Tell us what you want to see, and don't feel like it has to be American entertainment.
Yes.
You know, if you don't live here, and what you're seeing on TV, like if you're seeing an episode of something or a movie, or you've got a book that you want to put out there, please let us know. Like, find us on Twitter, find us on Instagram.
We are at Edgeworks Entertainment basically everywhere.
Yeah. And feel free to reach out to me and Alex as well on any of these crazy social media sites.
I am at Alex for the win.
I think mine is just Lacey Hannan.
Yep.
Super boring.
Yep.
But, you know.
Yeah, we
Totally.
have a list of things that we want to do next. Next week we're going to be doing The Martian, the feature film, but we have a list of things that we're going to do after that. You know, things like The Expanse, things like First Man, things like Interstellar. We have these stories that put real science and real history into the entertainment, but we want more. So if you have a movie, a book, a television episode that is really good.
And the thing is get specific. If there's something that you really want people to see, like if it's Defying Gravity, like tell us which episode, because I don't love Defying Gravity and I only want to watch one of the episodes.
Yeah.
If I have to, it will be one. But he'll watch all 11 of them, whatever. I think it's 11.
Yeah.
It's whatever. It was canceled.
Yeah.
But
She said happily.
Sorry, it's
smug
so
about this show being canceled.
No, I don't want anyone to lose their jobs.
But no, seriously, we are looking for suggestions, movies, books, television shows. If you are watching us live, feel free to put it in the chat. If you are watching this after the fact on YouTube, post it in the comments. We check them out all the time and respond. And
last thing, my mom wants everybody to know that they need to go watch the most recent episode of PBS's show Nova, which has been on the air forever.
1,000 years. Yeah.
And they just did an episode on perseverance. And she said it made her cry.
Nice.
And you get to see like apparently a super multicultural, awesome group of scientists who made this happen.
Yeah.
And she said it was super inspiring. So if you need to see something that is not meant to be as entertainment, go watch it.
All right.
And apparently if you have Amazon Prime, you can access it.
Okay.
So
Cool.
my little tip for the week.
Well, that is it for The Martian by Andy Weir. Tune in next week when we check out the feature film.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we'll be going on from there.
Yeah. You guys have a good weekend.
Have a good one.
Bye, guys.